Hello, my name is Andrew Keeney. I'm a channel account executive with Anthology, a leading software solutions company who, for the past 20 years, has been providing award-winning solutions for higher education, federal government, state government, and commercial entities. This webinar, focused around education technology and the trends affecting public safety agencies, will provide insight into technology issues agencies face in today's fast-moving world, and ways they are solving those issues through their technology decisions. Before we get started, at any time throughout this webinar, you can submit questions in the chat feature. We will address all questions at the end of the presentation. We here at Anthology would like to thank our host, DLT Solutions, for conducting this webinar. DLT Solutions is a strategic government aggregator. For over 30 years, they've been providing top-tier hardware, software, and professional services to public sector agencies throughout the country. It's now my pleasure to introduce our speakers. Thomas Herman is a senior account executive at Anthology. For over 13 years, Tom has worked closely with a range of government and commercial organizations, helping them create effective online solutions. Rob Turner, business development manager with AWS, focused on their justice, corrections, and public safety division. With 21 years in the U.S. Marshals Service before joining AWS, Rob has extensive experience with law enforcement, disaster response, tactical communications, cybersecurity, policy and legislative affairs. Ben Jones, former education director with the Wisconsin Department of Corrections. He's put Wisconsin at the forefront of innovative solutions regarding technology and inmate education. Prior to his public service, Ben rose through the ranks of education sector from teacher to principal to superintendent. We appreciate you all joining us today. And Tom, we appreciate you sharing your insights. The floor is all yours.
Andrew, thank you. And thank you everyone for joining. My name is Tom Herman. Thanks for the intro. And I am the senior account executive for the Anthology state and local government team. Over my work life here at Blackboard, now Anthology, which started 12 plus years ago, which I refuse to believe, we've built a very strong business within public safety, fire service, law enforcement, corrections, and emergency medical services, which we here at Anthology often describe as mission critical training organizations, and I think you would all agree. And I think the overarching theme for why we've seen this success, before I jump into the next slide and talk more about our themes, is that these organizations really look at education as critical for upskilling their public safety workforce. And we at Anthology are a true education-focused company. With, of course, extensive experience in government, as you can see from these slides. And to give you more context around some of these clients, we support over 1 million learners in the Army and Air Force, supporting training for over 100,000 officers in California, supporting FEMA's U.S. Fire Administration and the Department of Defense Fire Academy, touching most of the officers in the Commonwealth of Kentucky through city and state deployments, state deployment for emergency management in Texas, state deployment for emergency medical services in Virginia and California, and statewide deployments for corrections in Wisconsin and Kansas, among many more. Now, the reason I go into that extensive experience is because across that diverse set of public safety clients, there have certainly been common trends and challenges related to educational technology for the public safety workforce. And we've identified by analyzing our clients the 5 most common challenges these organizations bring to us. Now, they're in no particular order of precedence, although the first one is probably the most glaring issue out there. Staffing and retention, small training staff. I mean, it's no surprise to anyone here that staffing and retention is a very difficult challenge across public safety. Specific to training teams, there are often really small, very small training teams, limited instructional designers, often low IT personnel retention, So these clients are looking for a secure cloud-based solution that's easy to use. Oftentimes now, this also leads to the request for AI assistive technology, which is exactly how we here at Anthology have more recently been able to help solve this problem. We provide an easy to use LMS with the first ever AI course design assistant that can help our clients structure and create more engaging courses, tests, and much more without a large staff of instructional designers. I mean, we recently finished a deployment with the California Emergency Medical Services Authority. They have one person administering and creating much of their content. So I'm sure you all can relate with this challenge. It's across all of public safety. Now, number two, publisher content and SME authored JIT content. A couple acronyms there. I'll explain what they are. But our AI course design assistant also helps make it easy for any SME or subject matter expert to more quickly create just-in-time trainings, which is paramount, so that they can push out relevant and timely trainings to their staff. But on top of that, these organizations are often working with publisher content from Vector Solutions, HSI, Skillsoft, Jones and Bartlett, Lexipol. There's so many other publishers out there. And here at Anthology, we work with many of those publishers and many others by supporting industry standard integrations like LTI or Learning Tools Interoperability. That way you can build your own content that you're the experts on, that's specific to your organization, your state, as well as pipe in publisher content to cover all your training requirements. Now, number three on here, all of these organizations require an education solution that can support blended training, meaning they deliver some of their trainings online, some of their trainings in the classroom. Think of law enforcement and fire academies, often having cadets on campus, and then also deploying a lot of the training continuing ed online. Or other organizations like Texas Emergency Management deploying events across the state. And so we support that with several different areas of our platform, but specifically we have something called the on-the-job training module, which is flexible enough to build rubrics for evaluating field training, whether it be how to perform a simple task like rolling up a fire hose or maintaining that fire truck and your equipment, or aligning to SOPs, right? Standard operating procedures and the guidelines for incident response. Now, fourth is redundant reporting for learners, or multiple systems that our learners need to report to their completions, their training completions. So whether it be officers, I often think of California in this case. We support over 20 different departments there. And in more than a handful, there are peace officers in those departments. And they have to report training completions to both their department as well as to the California Commission on Peace Officers Standards and Training. And then think of EMS organizations that have to report training not just to their organization, but also back to the Commission on Accreditation for Pre-Hospital Continuing Education, or CAPC, for those of you in the EMS space. We help these organizations by providing integration capabilities between state departments' systems and that state's post organization, or through publishers that have pre-established integrations with CAPC. Now, last, all of these organizations key in on user management and security. In fact, security is often the first word that we hear from a potential client, right? And they want to be able to manage multiple groups of users, segment user groups, and manage permissions differently within those groups. And these are things that a lot of the public safety specific solutions out there have limitations on. Um, and they also have unique needs. I think of Texas Emergency Management's case, and some of our federal clients that have the unique need of multi-factor authentication when it comes to security. And they get their learners into our LMS using staff PIV-I or CAC cards. And then in the correctional education space, a whole other animal. And we see a theme of centralizing learning management by the state departments of correction in order to expand opportunity with partnering universities so that learners who typically only have access maybe to one university can have access to all the universities that partner with the DOC. And then in corrections, they also almost always have very stringent security requirements that are specific to corrections. And in this particular case, we've modified or created a corrections version to prevent inmate to inmate communication, because that is so important to these organizations. So we help support these wide-ranging public safety challenges and trends with the end goal of contributing to a solution for retention issues, upskilling, for reducing recidivism, and to create more efficient management of educational programs, because we know how much that can impact an organization. So if you have any questions, of course, please reach out to us, to Andrew, to the DLT team, and I will kick it back to Andrew to introduce our next speaker.
Tom, thanks so much. That was really interesting insight to see how education is helping public safety agencies and where it's driving, a safer community.
My pleasure.
I'll turn the floor over to Rob Turner.
Hey, thank you very much. And thank you to everybody for tuning into this webinar. Again, my name is Rob Turner. I'm a business development manager for AWS, and I participate as part of our justice and public safety team. A lot of folks ask, what is that? So we have a team of former practitioners here at AWS that are focused solely on justice and public safety. And what that means is we have leaders that are focused on law enforcement, courts, 911, and corrections. So I lead the corrections subvertical for the JPS team. And what I do is I focus on independent software vendors and solution providers in the correction space, in addition to end customers, so that they can innovate and deliver solutions to improve the corrections environment. And specifically, I lean in heavy on those solutions that are really impacting outcomes in that space. In corrections, of course, education and healthcare are just two of those really critical program areas. So why AWS, and how does AWS support these solutions? And in short, AWS, Amazon Web Services, is the cloud compute division of Amazon. And what we do is we allow partners like Anthology to rapidly build IT infrastructure, spin it up, scale it quickly in a high available, extremely secure environment so that they can deliver high performance solutions to their customers. Education obviously being the focus here, and a focus area for me in corrections. Anthology and other customers of ours, they leverage over 200 services offered by AWS to do so, with priority on high availability and security. I think this is a very important point, especially in the corrections environment, in that in most cases, cybersecurity is outward facing. We're worried about outbound or incoming penetration from threats in the IT space. And in corrections, while they're also concerned about that, they're also concerned about folks getting out onto the open internet. And we've proven through a variety of solutions that that can be done very securely, which then really increases the availability of rich educational content to our incarcerated population. I think another important point is having that cloud hosted environment really allows scalable connections to other content providers. Think local universities and school systems. The ability to connect those into an LMS just expands exponentially the amount of content that's available to our learners in the incarcerated environment. Another question I get a lot in trends is, what about AI? A lot of confusion around what is AI, what's not. We're not going to go into that here today, but there are some interesting concepts that a variety of customers and partners are engaged upon, like the possibility of an AI-led instruction, right? So having that chatbot morph into a real-time one-on-one or one-to-many educational tool in which a learner can actually interact, ask questions, and get answers. On top of that, of course, AI is great for analytics. So what educational programs and content are working? Which ones are leading to living wage jobs? And to Tom's point, reducing recidivism. So the ability to have information in the cloud readily available to be analyzed, to run robust tools and services from AWS, really can provide those customer insights into what's working, what's not, and using predictive analytics to plan what the educational program might entail now and what it might incorporate in the future. Again, thank you for tuning in. I'm very privileged to be able to share my insights on this and look forward to the additional conversation.
Rob, thanks so much. It's awesome to see what AWS Cloud is doing for the justice and public safety area, and how they're helping folks transform legacy solutions, reduce costs, and help both employees and their constituents. Purchasing software as a public employee is not easy, as most of those listening in know. And Ben, we're excited that you're here today because you've been through that battle, and we're excited to hear your insights and to leave behind some things on what people can be thinking through. So Ben, thank you for joining us today. Take it away.
Thanks, Andrew. So I just want to kind of set the frame. What I'm about to talk about today is really our progression in Wisconsin corrections, from offering some courses to offering programs of study to offering a system and a systematic development of an educational package. And this goes through many iterations, but was partially based on some of the problems and challenges that Tom laid out as it relates to staffing shortages, the lack of materials available for people who are incarcerated, and all of the contextual things around technology that go into correction spaces. And I do want to tell one quick story that at the end of the day, we started in this progression from course, program to system. Our starting point in around 2018 was that we were delivering to about 35 or 40 people at seven different facilities throughout the state. And when we introduced a little bit of technology, we bumped up from, at that time, an enrollment of around 65 people. The introduction of one piece of technology bumped us up to 150 students at 11 sites. And then as we progressed into systematic approaches, when I left the Wisconsin DOC, we had 750 students enrolled at 22 different sites. And the value of that is the research is pretty clear about recidivism as it relates to educational opportunities, and expanding those opportunities was a really important part of that story, and creating a system that allowed the expansion of other training programs because of staff shortages and centralized resources that are available. So that progression really started with, like, let's solve a problem, and what do we need to do to solve that problem? And it isn't one thing, it's the whole thing. So telling this story is really about understanding the whole picture and breaking apart all the many parts of that to take a look at what the options are and what you have to do to get there. So the first problem that we had is textbook distribution. We had one textbook. How do you distribute that across the different parts? And what do you do with that? So in order to kind of look at this, we took a holistic picture. What were the networks that we had? What was the ability to share resources centrally or to share resources within any given prison system? And then the different elements had to take a look at the operating systems that are available. The servers are these computers that have specific purposes, that there might be an email service or different things. And we had to understand what's available, what's safe for corrections, and how do you do all that stuff. And then the other elements of software, data, security are all pieces that folks like Tom and Rob that we leaned on to understand how this looks. And I'll go into these a little bit more. I think the first question that I answer when people ask is like, what device do you use? Because delivering electronic content it requires all of those things, but a lot of people start at, we want that. And what I hope to tell the story of is to move from a program or a that to a system is to really think and look at the big picture. So just going into a little bit of the overall picture of this to understand how to create a systematic approach to this, we had to look at different software platforms and packages that were out there and consider these pieces. So you can see the different types of software that we considered. And one of the key pieces is really understanding, we had to really understand the lens of the stakeholder group. So when we talked to security people, we were talking a specific thing. When we talked to IT folks, that was a different audience. So they need to think, even within the IT folks, there are different specialty areas that had to be considered with the various vertical teams in our IT departments, and then talking to wardens, and then talking to teachers, and ultimately talking to the end students that we served. Putting all those pieces together, what is the best software? How do we think about structuring a systematic approach to this? So these are just pictures of risk, and this was the kind of really important part of what we were looking at, was the security. Here's what's super important about this is every single state and every kind of jurisdiction that runs corrections enterprises has a different security risk. And there's this whole gambit of things. But as we talk about corrections education, what's most telling is thinking about it from this perspective. The least risk is just written correspondence through the mail. The most risk is students going off the prison site in attending college in person in a community setting. And the layers in between that have to do with different levels of risk, both external, as Rob talked about, and internal out facing risk. And I think it's super important to have an internal discussion, at least in corrections education, as it relates to what is your risk tolerance for your system and your state, and can you mitigate risk is the second part of that discussion. So device selection, there are things that are out in the marketplace now, and those are listed and shown here. These are how electronic or technology components get distributed ultimately on the device, but understanding that there's also the networking, there's the operating system. All of these things are considerations as folks are selecting educational platforms to take a look at. And our story went through understanding each of these, and each of these has they have pros and cons to them. And ultimately what we had to kind of think about was how to pick a device that would allow us to scale and systematically approach and use all the software pieces that we wanted to use to enhance our network, that works in our operating system environment, that we can do all the things that we want to do. So as we kind of looked and reviewed all of these pieces, we went through the end point. So we started with the end in mind. What do we want people to be able to do with the technology? Where do we want it accessible? Because there's education buildings, there are recreational spaces, there are cell blocks, and there are housing units, and all of those pose individual risks and tolerance levels and what we want to kind of think about. I always mention procurement authority and budgeting, because as somebody said, you can say I want this, and if you don't have the authority to purchase it through your agency, that's a problem. And then figuring out the budget. And one of the unique things that we did that I do want to mention here that I'm asked a lot about is the department. Most corrections departments and agencies have a fund through inmate use of things like telephone calls and things like that they're required to spend on that population. And so what we did in Wisconsin is we purchased our technology on the front end, And then we charged a rental fee for our devices for folks to use, and we charged those to the college. So it was a very much a partnership to create that systematic approach where we're front loading the funds, and then those funds are being reimbursed from the college partner through their Pal allocation. And again, reminding people that the security posture has to be taken into consideration, and it should not be considered static, because I've talked to a ton of people who have said our security would never allow X, and you go back 3-4 years later and the security is, or the technology is different, and the security inside of the technology is different, and so the security posture may have changed. And then one of the key pieces that the IT folks would, say is the most important part is an ongoing. It's not good enough just to buy something. You have to think about replacement, upkeep, user management, all of the things that are in an ongoing thing. So as you drive to a decision point about what you're going to do, why you want to do this, you have to have a North Star. And in corrections education, it was the student experience. What do we want students to be able to do, and how do we want them to be able to do it? Because you can get lost in a ton of rabbit trails as you think through how to accomplish that. So in creating a system, moving from like textbooks to a device to a systematic approach, we asked specific questions to create a system. Why and what are we trying to create as an ecosystem as it relates to technology, corrections, education? Where do you only go to the school and that's where you do your stuff? Because I'll give you a very quick example. We really wanted our students to be able to access things like academic advising, financial aid advising, tutoring service, all of this stuff. One of our colleges is located in Milwaukee, and for them to have staff members at a prison that is almost 300 miles away is not realistic. So how do we get people that experience? Well, there's video-based technology in the world, but here's a key part to that. We had no taste in allowing people to have external speakers or cameras on our devices that were in their housing units. So we had to think about, in order to deliver video-based academic advising, tutoring, that kind of stuff, that had to be done in the education building, which then creates an operational problem. How do you allow people to come up, do their tutoring or mini lessons from instructors or instructor office time or whatever the case is operationally, when most of the courses that they're and the content they're working on is independent through an online platform? How do you kind of square those things and make those work independently? The question about who's on the team is really understanding who is the ultimate decision maker, who needs to be involved in the brainstorming, who are the stakeholders. And one of the key ingredients that we did is every time we rolled out something new, we went around and asked our students, who we've deemed as the key stakeholders, what's working, what's not working, what can we do to improve. And as we set out to think about creating this system and this ecosystem, the question was like understanding that challenges are not barriers, or you could flip that to a barrier is a challenge. Challenges are designed and baked into any systematic approach to something, and it's about what are the strategies to get through those. So I literally brought our devices to a security directors meeting and rolled out the questions that I thought they would ask from their point of view, and the really hard questions. And I did that in advance in the hopes that I could provide some context for them to understand, here's what we've thought about already, and here's how we're going to mitigate that risk. And that goes to language, because I couldn't speak the same language that I spoke to the IT people, to either security people or the wardens, because they don't speak IT, which I have found is its own unique language. So having different points of view and different talking points to those people was an important part of building an ecosystem. And I think that's it.
Ben, thank you. That is great. That's fantastic. We really appreciate sort of your insights there and what challenges you ran into. Challenges are not barriers. Barriers are not challenges. That's a great little wrapper. We appreciate everyone who attended today. As we come to the end of this webinar, it looks like there were several questions put into the question bank for those that asked those questions, and for those that attended. We'll send a wrap up of all questions asked, and that way everyone can receive them. So with that, Ben, Rob, Thomas, really appreciate all your insight today on the educational landscape with public safety, and we hope everyone enjoyed this webinar. With any questions, if you have any questions or concerns, or want to get additional details, visit the anthology.com website, TD Synix's public sector website, or the Justice and Public Safety website. And there's some more details, as well as use cases and white papers on how people like yourself are using this technology. Again, reach out to DLT if you'd like a complimentary demonstration of some of the things you heard today. We hope everyone has a great rest of their day, and thank you for joining us.